All right. Well, hello there, YouTube. Hello there. Let's Create Gaming here with another response video. Today we're going to be responding to Professor Stick. His titled video named "Amazing Evidence Against Evolution," and this was published on November 17th, 2018. I don't know why I told you that, but I did like this video. I do disagree with it. I didn't dislike it. I kind of like to see things whether I like it or if I don't like it. I still like the videos only because it's good for expanding my knowledge, and yeah, it's really the reason why I liked it. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into this.
Hey guys, welcome to an episode where we are responding to a video attempting to criticize evolution, which is suggested to me by a patron. This is actually a small segment from a 1 hour long documentary, and since it's so long I can't get to the whole thing, I apologize in advance for the quality of the video. Let's have a look.
Even though Darwin's Tree of Life is included in virtually every biology textbook published over the last half century, contrary to what we've been told, there is no conclusive evidence of the common origin of all life.
Okay, so the origin of life is abiogenesis, as you guys all know, but what about the claim?
True, but what Lee Strobel said, is technically true. There is no positive evidence for any primordial soup. But we'll continue.
That all life came from a single or a small group of species. Now, while evolution does claim that all life perhaps came from a common ancestor, there isn't too much to that claim other than implications. But of course, if we look at the timescale, it makes sense. Life began somewhere around 3.7 to 4.3 billion years ago. This number isn't exact and is only an estimation, but it's accurate enough. Of course, estimating the first sign of life is extremely difficult since single cells don't leave fossils in the traditional sense through their skeletons, like what we're used to. Anyway, given the amount of time and the rate of evolution, there's plenty of time for all species to have emerged from the same ancestor.
Untrue. So you have to understand what Darwin posited in his book on the origin of species, which is a gradual, naturalistic, unguided process with slight successive changes over time. This is true. But what he said still holds today, which is 1 out of 10,000 mutations is only going to be beneficial and will only be selected. That means 9,999 mutations, generally speaking, as an overview, with the natural selection process, is going to be non-beneficial, and that happens, and it can only happen. How do I put it? Well, 1 out of 10,000 times. So you got 10,000. Well, not necessarily 10,000 generations, but every mutation, every slight random variation, genetic variation, generally speaking, the vast majority, almost all of it, is going to be non-beneficial, some even harmful, but only 1 out of 10,000 chance that it's going to be beneficial. So you have that odds against against not necessarily first life, but when life began and it began producing, and natural selection was selecting the best, the fittest, and those who were survival, essentially those who were the fittest. They are the ones who continued on. Because sexual selection obviously does play a key part in this, but natural selection is the key, acting on random genetic mutation and variation. That's the key point. There's only 1 out of 10,000 chance that a mutation, a random genetic mutation, is actually going to be beneficial. So,
of course, that's not conclusive evidence, but it's a reasonable assumption. Either way, it doesn't dent the fact that evolution happens and that speciation occurs, which gives rise to the diversity of species we see today.
See, he's talking about abiogenesis, and abiogenesis goes hand in hand in definition with pre-biological natural selection. Now, pre-biological natural selection is a contradiction in terms. Now, evolutionary theory admits that natural selection requires a self-replicating organism to work. Organisms reproduce and their offsprings have variations. Yes, this is testable. One of the ones that are better adapt to their environment and survive better, And so those adaptations are preserved and passed on to the next generation and the next, and so on and so on. However, to have reproduction, there has to be cell division. So the whole point of abiogenesis, or pre-biological natural selection, is to figure out how life began. Where did the information in the cell come from? So we go to the cell and we go down to the DNA, we go down to the RNA, you go down to the proteins. Where did the first protein come from? And the thing is, abiogenesis research presupposes the existence of information-rich DNA and proteins for the first cell. But that's the problem. Those are the very things that the researchers are trying to explain. So in other words, you've got a self-replicating organism for Darwinian evolution to take place, but you cannot have a self-replicating organism until you have the information necessary in DNA, which is what you're trying to explain in the first place. It's like a guy who falls into a deep hole and realizes, dang, it's like a guy who falls into a deep hole and he's like, dang, I need a ladder, get out. So he climbs out of the ladder, goes home, drives to the store, buys the ladder, and then drives back, jumps back in the hole, and then climbs up. It's begging the question. So the whole point is, where did the information first come from? That's the key question. And he is right here, where he says that the non-conclusive evidence of abiogenesis research does nothing to dent the fact that that evolution via natural selection, acting on random genetic mutation and variation, doesn't cause. Let me rephrase this. So he's right in saying that what Lee Strobel said does nothing to make a dent in the fact that evolution still, as of today, still causes new species. As he said, speciation. But that's not the point. We're not talking about modern natural selection. We're talking about abiogenesis. So, yeah, let's go and continue.
Moving on.
Perhaps the most damaging blow to Darwin's theory is the fossil record.
Yes, apparently to creationists, one of the greatest branches of evidence for evolution somehow disproves evolution.
So, in a sense, yes. The fossil record, I guess, in Professor Stick's words, is the greatest evidence for evolution. But just as an Indian tribe, the spears and swords is the greatest weapon they have against an invading army, the invading army, to them, that's weak. They got Velcro and AKs. So let's continue.
If all living organisms have descended from the same primitive life form, then the rock strata of the Earth should be filled with the fossilized remains of animals that were once part of a great evolutionary chain. A chain of small biological modifications, ultimately leading to a spectacular diversity of life.
I first want to know what you mean by the rock strata being filled with the remains of life. How many fossils do you think are actually able to form?
Well, Charles Darwin said that we ought to be able to find thousands upon thousands of intermediate fossils. And we have found them, since every organism in linear time is a transitional fossil. Just like my parents are intermediate specimens of my grandparents, and I am an intermediate species to my children. But what Charles Darwin said is that we should, based on my theory, we should find thousands of thousands going back further and further. And that's because we have found we found hundreds of soft-bodied cells, or soft bodies, so to speak, those without exoskeletons, like leaves and embryos, for example, and simple cells just fossilized. So we have found those in the hundreds. So if we can find those, then it's plausible that, or let me rephrase this, and it's quite possible that we should be able to find even fewer, I said fewer, we should find, even going back in time through the strata, we should be able to find some sort of even more simple life.
The majority of organisms that die do not leave fossils that are able to be preserved for thousands and millions of years. Land animals are even more rare since it is much more difficult for fossilization to occur due to the land likely being eroded away. And even in the ocean, strong currents are likely to destroy the remains of the deceased animal. On top of that, animals without skeletons or shells or any kind of hard body part are even less likely to be preserved. In order to preserve fossils of any kind, they must be buried relatively rapidly in an environment without oxygen, by mud or sediment for example, then allow minerals to crystallize to shape a mold. That's a very simplified idea, but from that you can see how rare an occasion this really is. To expect rock sediments to be full of fossils is just dumb. We discover what
Well, that's what Charles Darwin said, so in a way you're calling him dumb. And just throwing that out there. Evolutionists from, I believe, the 1960s and 1960s and before, after 1860, pretty sure they all thought that they were going to find thousands, quite a bit of fossils supporting evolution.
we can and we make the most out of it. And as for the part where you mentioned that fossils should show us changes that lead to the diversity of life today, that is actually exactly what is seen. Every fossil and even every organism living today is a transitional species, because there is no end goal for evolution. In addition, if you look at the fossil record, they get less and less complex in structure the further back you go in time.
I don't think that's correct, and I'll tell you why. So creationists agree with one of Darwin's contemporaries, Louis Agassiz, when he concluded after reading the first edition of The Origin of Species that the fossil record, particularly the record of the explosion of the Cambrian animal life, posed an insuperable difficulty for Darwin's theory. So to see why, consider brachiopods and trilobites, two of the best documented creatures in the Cambrian fossil record by 1859. The brachiopod, as you see here, with its two shells, look like a clam or an oyster, but is very difficult inside. As shown in the accompanying figure, it possesses a gonad, mantle cavity, anterior body wall, body cavity, gut, low phosphor, the last of which is a feeding organ of a ring of tentacles, usually in the shape of a coil or horseshoe, with a mouth inside the ring of tentacles and an anus outside. The brachiopod exhibits a highly complex overall body plan with many individual complex and functional integrated anatomical systems and parts. And this is all at the beginning, near the beginning of the fossil record. Its tentacles, for instance, are covered by cilia precisely arranged to generate and direct a current of water towards its mouth. And I would say, in my opinion, that is, I would not say necessarily irreducible complexity, but that is some very, very ordered complexity and supposedly a simple creature in the beginning of the fossil record. Now, even more sophisticated was the trilobite, as seen here in this figure, with its three longitudinal lobes across its head, a raised middle lobe, and a flatter pleural lobe to either side, and a body divided into three parts: head, chest, and tail, the former two consisting of as many as 30 segments. It had a pair of legs for every pleural groove and another three pairs for the head. Most dynamic of all were the compound eyes found on even some of the early trilobites, eyes that afforded these not so primitive animals a 360-degree vision of field. The abrupt appearance of such complex anatomical designs presents a challenge to each of the two main parts of Darwinian theory, which is common descent and common ancestor. So it's not just creationist. I hope he realizes. Is it recording? Is it recording? Okay, it is. My apologies. So it's not just creationists, but also other agnostics. For example, William Dembensky is a prominent one. He's a non-believer, and you also got some Confucianists, some Hindus, Buddhists. Confucius are a good example of those who do not believe in necessarily a divine, who are quite skeptical of Darwinian theory, and it's not just creationists, so to speak, that have this. What's the word I'm looking for? Great doubt is what I'm looking for against evolution, especially Darwinian evolution. Uh, well, that's the only evolution, really. But it's not a present objection. It's been here since the days of Louis Agassiz. So we'll go and continue on.
with less variation as well. I don't know what exactly you're expecting when it comes to fossils. Creationists seem to be living in their own reality, making up things about the fossil record that supports their narrative, instead of actually seeing reality for what it is. The truth is, the fossil record is a powerful tool that supports our evolutionary tree of life. We can bicker back and forth if you really want, but we won't get anywhere until you stop strawmanning what the fossil record really says.
We're not,
after 2 centuries of
so
research,
we're not necessarily strawmanning, and the Cambrian explosion, as well as the Shengjian explosion, and as well as the Edicarian mini explosion, are all actual facts of the fossil record. So we're not straw manning it, so to speak, or at least I'm not. So yeah, we'll just go and continue.
research, highlighted by excavations in southern China, the multitude of transitional experiments, or missing links, that should exist, are conspicuous only by their absence.
Alright, let's skip to a point where they don't make up shit about the fossil record.
But it's not. It's fact.
The most graphic example of this void in the fossil record is a geological era known as the Cambrian explosion.
The branching tree pattern of Darwin's theory is actually not seen anywhere in the fossil record unless we impose it with our own minds. So the Cambrian explosion is the most dramatic refutation of the tree of life.
Okay, so in case you guys don't know, the Cambrian explosion happened about 540 million years ago and is defined by the rapid appearance of many major animal phyla in the fossil record. This explosion played a massive role in the diverse amount of animal species we see today, and it's not just regular animals. The Cambrian explosion introduced to us more complex organisms, as opposed to the simpler forms before the event. Many creationists tried to cite the Cambrian explosion, saying, "Oh, evolution can't possibly be true. It can't explain the rapid appearance of complex organisms during the Cambrian explosion." However, that couldn't be more false. Evidence against evolution would be something that directly says something about the tree of evolution or mechanisms of evolution. You can't just throw.
Yes, that's the whole point. Let me explain. So within a 10 million period, 10 million time period, in the geological record, we find almost all, how do I say this, modern forms of life, whether they be, for example, they're like the centipedes with the many arms. They're like the hard shell bodies, kind of like the crabs, or the I give up. Or they be the worms, or etc., like jellyfish or whatever, or just regular big fish. It all happened within a 10 million. A 10 million year time period. And I know for for a lot of people, they disregard that, saying, "Oh, well, obviously that's enough time." I don't think they understand evolutionary theory, which demands one out of 10,000, and that's literally being generous. That's literally being the best case you can get is 1 out of 10,000 beneficial random mutations that will be selected for a successive series continuing thereforth. The worst case you will get is about, I want to say, 50,000 perhaps. I know I've heard someone say 110,000, but I don't know if it's that much. I think the highest would be 50,000, 1 out of 50,000. But I usually like to presuppose 1 out of 10,000, since that's what Darwin was hinting at. So 10 million years is not enough time. 10 million years is not enough time. Now, the reason I say that is because although you have successive forms coming in at this 10 million year time period, the problem is you don't see them at all here. You see perhaps a very few simpler forms of these complex forms, a few tens of millions of years back, but the vast majority of everything else is simple-celled. if they're even found. And it's all concluding back to the common ancestor. And we find thousands of these fossils in the Burgess shell, which is where the term Cambrian explosion was coined. Now, over the years, paleontologists have reflected on the overall pattern of the Precambrian and Cambrian fossil record in light of the Burgess shell, which is where the quote-unquote Cambrian explosion happened. And they too have noted several features of the Cambrian explosion that are unexpected from a Darwinian point of view. In particular, 1. The sudden appearance of Cambrian animal forms. 2. An absence of transitional intermediate fossils connecting the Cambrian animals to simpler Precambrian forms. 3. A startling array of completely novel animal forms with novel body plans. And 4. A pattern in which radical differences and form in the fossil record arise before more minor small-scale diversification and variation. So the pattern turns on its head the Darwinian expectation of small incremental change, only gradually resulting in larger and larger differences in form. So if you look at the figure, if you look at this figure here, 2.7, it illustrates the difficulty posed by the first two features, the sudden appearance and missing intermediates. So this diagram graph morphological change. This diagram graphs morphological change over time. So this one shows the Darwinian expectation that shows in morphology should arise only as tiny changes accumulate. This Darwinian commitment to gradual change through microevolutionary variations produces the classic representation of evolutionary history as a branching tree. Now compare this branching tree pattern with the pattern of the actual fossil record of what we have found so far. If you look at the bottom part of the figure, it shows that the Precambrian strata do not document the expected transitional intermediates between Cambrian and Precambrian fauna. Instead, Cambrian fossil record, or the record, especially in light of the Burgess shell, which is where the quote-unquote Cambrian explosion occurred, points to the geologically sudden appearance of complex and novel body plans. Now, of course, the fossil record, to their credit, does show an overall increase in the complexity of organisms from Precambrian to Cambrian times, as Darwin actually expected. But the problem posed by the Burgess shell, which is where the Cambrian explosion occurred, or where we find it, is not the increase in complexity, but the sudden quantum leap in complexity. The jump from simpler Precambrian organisms Precambrian organisms to the radically different Cambrian forms, sorry, my throat, appears to occur far too sudden to be readily explained by the gradual activity of natural selection and random variations. Neither the Burgess cell nor any other series of sedimentary strata known in the day when the strata was found recorded a pattern of novel body plans arising gradually from a sequence of intermediates. Instead, completely unique organisms such as the bizarre arthropod with its 15 articulated body segments, 28 gills, 30 flipper-like swimming lobes, long trunk-like proboscis, intricate nervous system, and 5 separate eyes appear fully formed in the Cambrian strata, along with representatives of other fundamentally different body plans and designs of equal complexity. Darwin, as we know, regarded the sudden appearance of the Cambrian animals as a significant challenge to his theory, and you can read this in The Origin of Species, where natural selection had to bridge yawning chasms from relatively simple life forms to exquisitely complex creatures. It would require great expanses of time. 10 million years is not enough time. That's what people don't understand. People that learn this in biology, high school biology, people learn this in college biology and introductory biology. They don't understand 10 million years is not enough time.
out the Cambrian explosion without actually researching what scientists speculate to be the actual cause of it, because there
And there is that artifact hypothesis and so on. So I think it's this guy who needs to do more research.
are explanations. For example, a sudden increase in oxygen levels during the time would have given the opportunity for more animals to thrive, both in
What would oxygen do? I mean, if we're being serious, oxygen. Oh, I can breathe better. Good. Now I can be more energetic, I guess, and then produce more offspring. Okay, but that just means that goes same for the predators. So even if the prey or herbivores population increases dramatically, so too in effect does the predator and keeps it in check. So I wouldn't see why that would be a plausible hypothesis.
the sea and on land. Before the event, oceans held so little oxygen that fish today would just die. Life was simple during the time, and simplicity means less oxygen was required to thrive. Of course, that's just one hypothesis. It's difficult to actually survey the environment during the Cambrian time, so scientists can't say for sure. But at least
It's actually not that difficult. We have, well, not we, not when I mean we as a species. So we have paleontologists, scientists who go to this Burgess cell, and the one in China, the Shengjian, and then the Edikan one. I forgot where that. I think it's in England as well, or it could be in Europe. I'm pretty sure it's in the UK though. You can go check that out. You can what's the word? Radioactive. You can date it. You can figure out the composition, any minerals specifically in there, since it's been what's the word I'm looking for? I guess you can say fossilized or set safe. There's a word I'm looking for. I'm sorry, you guys, but we'll go and continue on.
they're forming hypotheses and exchanging ideas. What are creationists doing exactly? You guys
We're offering critiques that are purely scientific with different implications. I know some creationists go quite a bit further and don't scientifically critique it and go on a more theological basis, but generally speaking, creationists who are educated in this matter do critique it from a scientific point of view, primarily because it is a science. So you would have to, if you're going to deal with science, you got to deal with the scientific method, the way of science, so to speak.
are just grasping at things like the Cambrian explosion and saying, oh look, that disproves evolution, without actually building upon that. What do you think caused the Cambrian explosion? What evidence have you gathered to believe what you believe? If you're
Well, I guess what I can say, if we use Darwin's actual, method, which is that in order to figure out what happened in the past, you look at the cause and effect relationships of today, and then you apply it to the past. So I don't know. Let's see. We know that information can only comes from a mind because of our experiential knowledge. We can do that. We can input it on digital information. So long as it's even if it's complex, it has to be ordered in such a way that everything works the way it's supposed to work. And if there's a glitch, there a random mutation, then it's generally speaking harmful to the creation. So we apply it to life. Oh, look, we have DNA. RNA and proteins. DNA is like the library of life, where RNA and proteins come to get their information, figure out, okay, what am I supposed to build? How am I supposed to build it? Just like Bill Gates would design a GUI. Okay, and if it messes up, you can't see the screen. So if we can infer that computers have ordered complexity of digital information, which comes from a mind, I would assume then it's rational in my conclusion that so too we can say that biological information, even though it's different kinds of information, biological from digital, mechanical from organic, still holds the key factor, both of them which are related, which is information, ordered information, whether it is complex or not. It's still information ordered in such a way that it does a preset program of what it's supposed to do. Just as digital information comes from a mind, biological information therefore it comes from a mind. That's what I'm saying. I don't know what other people are saying. I know that sometimes they go more too radical or zealot for my taste. But let's continue.
If you're going to say there's a gap, don't just leave it at that. Take the honest path and look for an explanation that is backed up by evidence or reasoning.
I do. I really do. I have 2 libraries full of books. You know, I got Charles Darwin. I don't have Denton, but I got Craig. I got Meyer. I'm hoping to get Behe. I already got Dawkins. I'm thinking about getting Harris. So, yeah, we're going to continue. I do have it backed up with evidence and reasoning, specifically reasoning that's backed up by the evidence. So, yeah, let's just go and continue on.
The Cambrian explosion of life was a dramatic episode in geological history.
So I hope you guys are looking at what this is showing you. So this is during the Cambrian explosion, this 10 million period in which all complex life, boom, just popped up into existence in the geological record, that is. If you can see,
Usually dated at about 530.
the body plans. So these are there. So within a 10 million year time span, you have simple celled organisms or complex celled organisms suddenly, I guess you can say, quantum leaping itself into extremely complex, relative to the complex cells and simple cells, forms. So you understand what I'm trying to say here. This is what it's showing you. It's not saying, oh, look, it disproves evolution. God lives. God's not dead. He's surely alive. Da-da-da. No, but rather it's saying, look, I disagree. This is my reasoning, and we're using the same evidence. And the evidence of the Cambrian explosion is more negative to evolution than positive.
Million years ago, the exquisitely preserved Cambrian fossils reveal that the body plans for virtually every major animal phyla appeared, not gradually and slowly as Darwin had speculated, but instead with astonishing suddenness.
This is true.
Darwin's theory may imply that changes to organisms are slow, but that doesn't mean it can't be fast.
This is true. But this has been critiqued not by theists but by atheistic Darwinists, and they have said you can't evolution by natural selection and sexual selection has to be slow. It can be quote unquote fast, but if we're slowly crawling our way, the best we can do is get on all fours and slowly walk. But you can't go further, because then if you go too fast, you will create monstrosities, genetic monstrosities, which will die out soon, or you'll get too much of a population size that they'll all die because predators the population size of predators aren't building up fast enough. Or if predators are building up fast enough, then they'll kill everything and then they'll die too. So evolution may possibly work fast, and it quite can, and it quite possibly could. But if it did, we wouldn't be where we're at today if evolution was true. And that's what there's a specific scientist, I can't remember, but he critiqued, I think he got fired for it too. Yeah, I think it was under fire for it. He's like, I'm not religious, I'm just critiquing. But yeah. So it could happen fast, but we don't want it to happen fast. We want it to happen slow and gradual through successive changes.
Sure, many of the proposed mechanisms of evolution may take time, but speed ultimately is determined by selective pressures. If the environment demands species to change, they will change. If it demands species to change quickly, they will, as long as it's not too quickly. Let's look at the sudden increase.
That's the point. Even Professor Stick knows. So much as is not too quickly. I don't think he understands here. Quickly to us would mean quickly, but quickly on the evolutionary, like quickly, like you get up and run. But in evolutionary standards, it's getting up from a crawl and just walking your way. We're expecting a run. I don't think he understands that.
Increased abundance of oxygen, for example. That is quite the evolutionary pressure. Organisms that are able to adapt fast and utilize this oxygen to increase their own complex function will greatly outcompete other organisms that don't. And this pressure would depend on how quickly oxygen was introduced. Of course, this isn't the only hypothesis out there, and is likely a combination of factors that gave us the sudden rise of the major animal phylum.
If we imagine the whole history of life on Earth taking place in one 24-hour period, the current standard estimates for the origin of life put it at about 3.8 billion years ago, let's say 4 billion. So if we start the clock then, our 24-hour clock, 6 hours, nothing but these simple single-celled organisms appear, the same sort that we saw in the beginning. 12 hours, same thing. 18 hours, same thing. 3/4 of the day has passed, and all we have are these simple single-celled organisms. Then at about the 21st hour, in the space of about 2 minutes, boom, most of the major animal forms appear in the form that they currently have in the present. And many of them persist to the present, and we have them with us today. Less than 2 minutes out of a 24-hour period. That's how sudden the Cambrian explosion was.
Okay, so this has actually been debunked multiple times by other YouTubers in the past. I was wondering why.
You're right, YouTubers. But it has been defended by theistic paleontologists, agnostic paleontologists, theistic YouTubers, agnostic YouTubers, as well as atheistic paleontologists, as well as now I think the whole field of paleontology defends the Cambrian explosion as a fact. This is true. There was an entire debate about this, I think, in Cambridge, and it was what's the evidence against or for evolution? And in it, the speaker said, evolution, I grant, is incredibly improbable to occur. Let me show you how it occurs. And he mentions the Cambrian time, and he says, we don't know how for sure, just to simplify it, we don't know how for sure, but somehow in a 10-year time span, if we expand it to, let's say, 100 years time span, 90 million years, we lost that. Just as an assumption, we assume that it rapidly changed, not as the run of evolution, but the walk of evolution. It stopped crawling, and environmental change forced them to start walking instead of crawling. And so it did go quickly, quote unquote, in evolutionary terms, but not too quickly, like Professor Stick here says. But he says maybe that's just lost because of the environmental change and another extinction level event. So that's why we have only the 10 million year time period of which we can all novel complex life pops up into existence, or if you want to simplify it, all complex life pops into existence. And how has it been debunked if it's defended by scientists? Continuing on.
Why this man looked so goddamn familiar. The Cambrian explosion lasted about 25 million fucking years. Sure, if we put it on...
Okay. Okay. So it's somewhere between 5 to 30 to 40 million years, but the general consensus is that it's 10 million years. If you read Darwin's Doubt, that explains it, but it gives citations as to why other scientists or paleontologists believe that to be true. So there's a consensus that it's 10 million years, but we'll grant him the 25. Even if it is 25 million years, though, still not enough time.
On the clock in the perspective of the entire duration life has been on Earth, it would look like a short period of time. But that's because life has been around for oh so long. Just another dishonest creationist claim. And
that's not necessarily true. I don't think he understands. If we, let's take his head, for example, okay? Let's start here. Let's say, going, as the analogy showed, all of this is literally simple-celled organisms, simple-celled. Then somewhere here, you get complex cells. Okay, cool. We have that gradual change upon which Darwin anticipated. And then at the 2-minute mark after 23 hours to 23 hours 2 minutes, that we'll assume his here 25 million time period. That's when all complex life came into existence. This is not a disputed fact in paleontology. I've went to a paleontology site and it's awesome. It's hot too. I'm in Arizona. It's hot. So the thing is, as I've said previously, it's not, and as Stephen Meyer says constantly, it's not the fact that we don't find gradual change from simple to complex, because we do in the fossil record, but it's the fact that it takes a quantum leap from simple to complex cells, and then all of a sudden, snap of the finger like Thanos, complex cells out of nowhere in the geological time record. And 25 million years, if we use his time, is still out of nowhere. That's not enough time.
Oh, I'd like to also raise this question in terms of intelligent design. If there truly were a god out there, what is his purpose in making simple life forms and keeping them for 3 billion years?
I don't know, maybe preparing the way for minerals to be used today?
Then suddenly making all the animal phyla out of nowhere.
Maybe because he found that the time was right, that the environmental conditions were good enough, and he just created all of them out of nowhere.
And then creating humans a whole 500 million years later.
I don't know, maybe he made the dinosaurs, if we're using old Earth creationism. He killed off all the dinosaurs for the purpose of letting them be oil and coal. I wouldn't say coal, but I think it's coal, but oil and, resources that are required today. And he made humans because he wanted to. Simple as that.
It seems like you guys are so adamant in debunking evolution that you fail to see what this means in your own worldview.
No, I don't see how it fails me in his own view. Nope. Not really, or at least not for me.
Are you suddenly accepting that the Earth is old just to grasp at the Cambrian explosion supposedly debunking evolution? The
No.
lengths you guys are willing to go to, the amount of dishonesty is just incredible.
Your lack of knowledge on this subject is incredible.
Alright, we're going to skip ahead a bit into a later part of the documentary.
In the 19th century, when Darwin was alive, scientists thought that the basis of life, the cell.
And I don't mean that in an offensive way. I'm just saying he's getting mad here, and he's accusing creationists like myself of being ignorant and one might say unscientific, and that may be true in some cases, but in the majority of cases of uneducated creationists. But those who are educated, he's generalizing it. That's like saying because one person of an ideology did something bad, all of them therefore are bad. That's not the point.
Was some simple glob of protoplasm, like a little piece of jello or something that was not hard to explain at all. But with the hard work of science in the 20th century, we've seen that the cell is far from simple. It's got very complicated molecular machines and things that are very resistant to Darwinian explanation.
What? Resistance to Darwinian explanation? The complexity of the cell wouldn't dent that at all. It's not just organisms and species that evolve, individual cells also evolve. What, do you think bacteria just stop evolving or something?
Okay, now here's the thing he doesn't understand. And I'll give an example that actually Michael Behe, the man you saw in the video, actually gives, and it's called xylem. So xyla are whip-like hairs on the surface of cells. So if the cell is stationary, the xyla move liquid across the cell surface. For instance, you've got cilia lining your respiratory tract. Every cell has about 200 of them. They beat in synchrony in order to keep mucus away from your throat, in order to keep mucus towards your throat for elimination. That's how your body expels little foreign particles when you accidentally inhale. But cilia also have another function. If the cell is mobile, the cilia can row it through liquid. Sperm cells would be an example. They're propelled forward by a rowing action of cilia. And scientists used to think they were basic until they found that there are 9 pairs of microtubules that are long, thin, flexible rods which encircle 2 single microtubules. The outer microtubules are connected to each other by what's called Nexen linkers, and each microtube has motor protein called dynein. The motor protein attaches one microtubule and has an arm that reaches over, grabs the other one, and pushes it down. So the rod starts to slide lengthwise with respect to each other. As they start to slide, the Nexen linkers, which were originally like loose rope, get stretched and become taut. As the dynein pushes farther and farther, it starts to bend the apparatus and then pushes the other way and bends back. That's how you get the rolling motion of the cilium. But doesn't begin to actually to do justice to the complexity of the cilium. But the point is that these three parts, the rod, linkers, and motors, are necessary to convert a sliding motion into a bending motion so the cilium can move. If it weren't for the linkers, everything would fall apart when the sliding motion began. If it weren't for the motor protein, it wouldn't move at all. If it weren't for the rods, there would be nothing to move. And that's an example of irreducible complexity, that you reduce it down, that you get something complex and you reduce it down to a point where it's still complex, but it's irreducible further. Hence the name irreducible complexity. Now, there have been examples of experiments where you take other proteins out of that and it still works, but it's none of the three that are taken out. And that's the whole point of irreducible complexity. And on top of that, if we're going to go in deeper inside the cell, now we're going to be faced with ribosomes. And the reason I say that is because now we're facing the challenge of getting, how do I say it, new components in the cell to the right places where they can operate. So the nucleus, where the DNA resides, the mitochondria, which produces energy, the endoplasmic reticulum, which produces proteins, the Golgi apparatus, which is a way station for proteins that are being transported elsewhere, the lysosome, which is a garbage disposal unit, secretory vesicles, which store cargo before it's sent out of the cell, the pexrosome, which helps metabolize fats. Each compartment is sealed off by a membrane, just like a room has walls and a door. In fact, the mitochondrion has 4 separate sections. Counting everything, there are more than 20 different sections in each cell. And cells are constantly getting rid of old stuff and manufacturing new components, and these components are designed to work in one room, but not others. Most new components are made at the central location in the cell on things called ribosomes. And the ribosome itself is a collection of some 50 large molecules containing more than a million atoms as an automated factory that can synthesize any protein that it is instructed, emphasize instructed, to make by DNA. Now this is what I mean by we're being faced by the challenge, or he is, of getting these new components to the right rooms of, resistance to Darwinian explanation. Because in order to do that, you need to have another complicated system, just like you need to have a lot of things in place for a Greyhound bus to take someone from Philly to Pittsburgh. So first of all, you got to have molecular trucks, which are enclosed and have motors attached to them. You got to have little highways for them to travel along. You got to be able to identify which compartments are supposed to go into each truck. After all, it doesn't do any good if you just grab any protein that comes along, because one needs to go to a specific room. So there has to be a signal attached to the protein, kind of like a ticket, to let the protein onto the right molecular truck. The truck has to know where it's going, which means having a signal on the truck itself and a complementary signal on the compartment where the truck is supposed to unload the cargo. When the truck arrives where it's supposed to go, it's kind of like a big ocean liner that has crossed from London to New York. It pulls up at the dock and everybody's waiting. But oops, they forgot the gangplank. So now what are you going to do? So you see, you have to have a way for the cargo to get out of the truck and into the compartment. And it turns out this is an active process that involves other compartments recognizing each other, physically opening things up and allowing material to go inside. So you've got numerous components, all of which will have to be in place or nothing works. If you don't have the signal, if you don't have the truck, you're pretty much out of luck. Now, does the microscopic transportation system sound like something that's self-assembled by gradual modification over the years? Because if one doesn't work, then they all doesn't work. And if they all doesn't work, how can a mutation, 1 in 10,000 chance, to be beneficial, because all of the others would be harmful, in order for a successive gradual modification via natural selection and random mutation? Well, how would that work over the years? I don't see how it could have been. To me, that has all the contrivances of design. So
Eukaryotic organisms.
So that's what he means by resisting Darwinian evolution, not in the sense that the evidence is, fight power, but rather the evidence is negative towards evolution.
Organisms may be pressured in the macro sense of their overall function, but that has to happen first on a cellular level anyway. Hopefully you have a better explanation later on what you're trying to poke at.
Most people have no idea of how small and complex cells are. A typical cell from you or me, called a eukaryotic cell, is probably 1/10 of the size of the head of a pin. And yet, in that single cell, there are about 3 billion units of DNA making out the chromosomes. And those 3 billion units make the molecular machines of the cell, literally machines that make the cell work.
Complexity does not indicate design, nor
No, this is true. Complexity does not indicate design, because via natural selection you can get increase of complexity, but nowhere has it been seen that in the course of evolution of cells do you see any additional information of cells. And going back to complexity does not default design. It's true, but ordered complexity via inference to the best explanation, backed by experiential knowledge, implies, and we ought to infer, design.
nor does it dent evolution. This point has been reiterated so many times I don't know what else to say about it.
You know what? Me too, bro. Me too.
It's like going into an automobile factory. The factory has a large number of machines. The parts have to fit together in very specific ways to do their jobs. And if things go wrong, the cell is in big trouble. And just one cell is enormously complex, but humans, you and I, are made from trillions of cells. And those trillions of cells have to fit together in the right way and do their own job. Darwinism was a lot more plausible when we were thinking about globs of protoplasm than it is when we're thinking about molecular machines.
Well, that's just because you don't really understand evolution, because
No, he does understand evolution, and Stephen Meyer, which is one of his friends, understands evolution more than Behe. So he can always just go to his friend and ask him, and if not, he can just go to a Darwinist and say, hey, this is what I think evolution is, and he has. And, is this evolution? And they correct him or they permit it.
complex structures is actually what we would expect, especially for eukaryotic cells needing to keep up with the functions they must provide for multicellular structure. There's no doubt that complexity would arise.
True, but even if it's complex, is it ordered? Because if it isn't ordered, it doesn't work. And it has to be specifically ordered in such a way that it has to work for the whole of the cell. Even if one part fails and it's a delicate system, then it's possible that another part of the cell may fail, and so on until the whole fails, which is why there are backup systems inside the cell.
Had millions and billions of years to get to this stage after all. Not to
Do you not remember the Cambrian explosion? The fossil evidence?
mention what exactly is your definition of complexity here, because
By complexity, we mean ordered complexity, complexity that's ordered for a purpose, like ribosomes, like mitochondria.
things can't really just be complex by themselves.
Of course, that would be just random complexity.
Relatively speaking, yes, they are more complex to earlier organisms, but objectively, there's no real exact value that the word complex gives us. Maybe there's some other organism in another galaxy whose
True. That's why no one says ordered complexity, but everyone means ordered complexity. William Paley had this right.
structure is 10 times more complex than the cells we have here on Earth today. In that perspective, life here would be incredibly simplistic, wouldn't it? Don't just throw around the word complex expecting it to mean anything by itself, because I know you're trying to jump to the conclusion that God made it due to its complexity. But is it really that complex in the grand scheme of things? How can we know for sure? It's not like we have a grand picture of all life forms in the universe in order to draw that conclusion.
You know what? I agree with him. I don't like the way they keep saying complexity. They ought to be saying ordered complexity. It all comes back to William Paley and Plato and Aristotle, but mainly William Paley. It's ordered complexity, not just complexity.
Each of these biochemical machines is a masterpiece of engineering and nanotechnology. They are essential to functions as vital and diverse as vision, photosynthesis, and the production of energy in the cell.
I wouldn't necessarily call it a masterpiece. Masterpiece implies that it's perfect, and many of these things you named aren't perfect. Let me just name a few examples. Hemoglobin, the protein essential for carrying oxygen in your blood, has an affinity 200 times greater for carbon monoxide than O2. That's why carbon monoxide is so toxic, even after considering the essential histidine that lowers CO affinity. Vitamin C, or ascorbic acid, can't be synthesized by our bodies. This molecule is an essential compound to many vital functions such as production of neurotransmitters, injury healing, collagen synthesis, neutralizing oxidizing agents, etc. You'd think such an important vitamin would be naturally synthesized by the body. After all, it's done in many other animals. In fact, really only primates and a few other examples lack this function. Dogs and cats, for example, and the majority of the animal kingdom could easily synthesize ascorbic acid on their own. These are flaws that really should not exist if a creator created the biomolecular machinery that is our body.
Well, I mean, you would consider it a flaw. I don't. I like oranges. Do you not like oranges? I mean, I don't like suffocating in smoke. I don't think anyone does. What was the other thing? There was another thing. Oh yeah, and you said masterpiece implies perfection. Yes and no. So masterpiece is relative. For example, to me, I thought that a certain person was a masterpiece of creation to me. But another person thought that she was so-so. It could have been better, the design of her could have been better, so to speak. I think masterpiece is a little relative, and I think you're taking that a little too far.
Michael Behe has studied several of these machines, including the flagellum, a remarkable rotary motor.
I remember the first time I looked in a biochemistry textbook and I saw a drawing of something called a bacterial flagellum with all of its parts in all of its glory. It had a propeller and the hook region and the drive shaft and the motor. And I looked at that and I said, that's an outboard motor. That's designed. That's no chance assemblage of parts.
The flagellum is an example some creationists like to pull out as a supposed example of design due to its complexity. And I've always wondered, why pick the flagellum? There are better examples, plenty of them actually, that will support your complexity point better than the flagellum. And
you're right, like DNA, the library of life, RNA, the workhorse of the DNA, proteins, the ant workers, so to speak, to the DNA queen. Watch to a life. Watch to a cup, watch to the world. Computers, ordered information in computers, digital code, versus ordered information in cells, biological code. See where I'm going with? There could be better examples, but this is an example to show people who are not educated that, look, this is a wonderful example. We could show you better ones, but we just don't want to. This is one that's very similar to an actual motor something that Mazda designed. So you kind of see why they would be doing it, because it's actually similar in design, in the actual design. We have O-rings and the actual motor and the rotor, and then the wheel, the shaft, the drive shaft.
And look, I'm not going to go through the structure of the flagellum here and explain to you why it's not as complex as you may think. And that's actually...
It is. You're right. It's really not that complex. But that's relative to you, I guess. I mean, is a car motor complex? I mean, let me rephrase this. Is a boat motor complex? I mean, if you think it is, then so too therefore is the flagellum. It's very similar design. And if you don't think that the flagellum is complex, then the boat motor is really not complex, because the design is quite similar, as shocking as it is.
Actually the case for many biomolecular machinery. It's usually a concept that appears more simple the more you know how it works. In this case,
that's not how that goes. The more you understand it, the more complex it becomes. That's the general case of biology. At first you thought DNA was it was all in all. Then you find out no, DNA is kind of like the blueprint. Then you go further. If you're like, oh, that's awesome. DNA does everything. Then you figure out, no, DNA is not really like a blueprint, but is actually more like a library. And that's where RNA comes to play. And you're like, oh, that's so cool. And then you figure out, no, proteins also come into play. What? And yeah, it's a very complex system with all the other parts of the cell, which all have a part to play. And if one of them is done, then they're all done. And it's like, what? And it's like, oh yeah, plus we got to go even further. It's like, face slap. What? So.
Case, the gradient and movement of protons is what rotates the flagellum for locomotion. I mean, don't take it from me, this guy in the video says the same thing.
The motor uses a flow of acid from outside of the cell to the inside of the cell to power the turning.
That sounds complex, doesn't it? Using the flow of acid to power its motor. But you know, it's not really acid, it's just hydrogen ions, which is also used for energy production even for the earliest of life forms. It's not that incredible. The flagellum itself also has a lot of unnecessary parts that removed would still retain the cell's locomotion function.
Well, I think it's incredible in the sense that a bacterium is using it. And the other things he cited was more complex cells. So, yeah.
Different species have different compositions of their flagella, many of which still function properly even without certain biomolecular components that others have. But let's just assume it is complex and designed to perfection. In that case, I wonder, why would a creator, who created this universe just for humans, give certain bacteria this powerful machinery, especially when many of these bacteria serve to infect human beings? Certain E. coli strains, for example, that cause painful urinary tract infections, have flagella. H. pylori, a bacteria responsible for stomach ulcers, have flagella. Why would this god give these infectious pathogens a tool that allows them to infect us better? That just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Unless you understand the doctrine of the fall, which is, that all of this was in existence in the garden. There was bacteria, but they had no malicious intent. That's where this flagellum would have been made, obviously. But then after the fall of man, then sin entered the world and death followed, and suddenly lions again in shape, and so on and so on. Even if they did have teeth, they can still eat vegetables and stuff. So it's kind of like you understand the Christian doctrine. So for Christians, or for educated Christians in theology, this isn't a problem. I don't want to go too much into detail of it, but I have a book on it. I think it's like 30 pages long. Not the chapter that talks about this, but part of the chapter, which goes into detail of this. I could probably make a video about it later, but I don't know at the moment. So we'll continue.
I think what Darwin was trying to show was that things that look designed aren't really designed, but that we can...
Oh yeah, it's also impressive for the fact that the flagellum can go at a max rate of 10,000 rotations per minute. Whereas, for example, Honda, the Honda S2000, that can only go at a max rate of 9,000 rotations per minute. So, I'd kind of like what Paley said. It's not if there was any malfunction, but rather if there's any design at all that we're currently want to answer the question. And the answer is yes, there is design. So he's using an emotional motive to kind of use as a red herring. So we'll go and continue.
Find naturalistic processes to account for the complexity of life.
One thing that I've heard Richard Dawkins say a lot is that natural selection gives the illusion of design. That is, survival of the fittest is such a powerful tool in selecting out the best structure or function of biomolecular machinery. And yes, that is indeed very true, especially when you consider that this has been going on for millions and billions of years. It's no wonder that these species appear as if they have been designed to survive in their particular environments.
And it's also a question to be raised because biologists and biochemists have actually asked ourselves, why do we even exist? Because why have they not gone extinct? Because there are better, more simple forms of organisms that actually can reach higher standards, so to speak, of naturalistic evolution That is, that they can evolve better than we can and have a better survival rate, better sexual selection, and yet, for some reason, we sahia.
Of course, that's why people like me, when debating creationists, like to pull out certain flaws with the human anatomy. Because evolution isn't perfect. It doesn't give you the perfect structure or function of everything.
You're right. And God doesn't give us the perfect design of us either, only optimal.
Meanwhile, in theory, that should be the case if an all-powerful creator designed us.
In his study of evolution and molecular machines, Michael Behe has raised a significant challenge to the creative power of Darwin's mechanism of natural selection. It is called irreducible complexity.
Nope. I'm so tired of hearing that term. It doesn't exist, it's not real, it's fake news, let's move on.
Not true. I'm going to have to stop you there, CNN. So, if you guys heard what I was talking about before with the cilia, the rotor, the motor, and the rod, there are 9 protein molecules that are in the that comprise the cilia, but there are only 3 protein molecules that are absolutely necessary for the whole thing. So you can take out all the others, but so long as the 3 remain, rotor, motor, rod, they will all work. They may not work as efficiently or as optimally, but they will work. That's irreducible complexity. I've stated it previously in the video. So here he sounds like he has an emotional bias against irreducible complexity, perhaps for a motivation against the application of design.
Irreducible complexity can be illustrated by a familiar, non-biological machine, a mousetrap. The trap is composed of 5 basic pieces: a catch to hold the bait, a strong spring, a thin bent rod called the hammer, a holding bar to secure the hammer in place, and a platform upon which the entire system is mounted. If any one of these parts is missing or defective, the mechanism will not work. All components of this irreducibly complex system must be present simultaneously for the machine to perform its function.
Okay, well, I guess we're going to talk about it after all. The biggest problem with irreducible complexity is its assumptions that evolution builds things up step by step. This part comes first, then the next part. But that's not actually the case. There are other complex ways that adaptation can occur that can give the final result we have today using mechanisms more than just improving upon the last. For example, it's likely that the components were already in place, but just don't have the function it has today.
Okay, but the problem you're not addressing is if they were already in place, where did those come from? You're not addressing that.
And natural selection improved upon these components until they cooperated for a particular purpose. Keep in mind that organisms and cells and
Okay, so they may have gradually evolved over time to make the mousetrap, so to speak, but it doesn't explain where the preset was come from. You know, I have presets on my Modern Warfare 3 online class and multiplayer, but I know that in order to have a preset, it was designed for me to have a preset. You see, who preset it? What preset it? Was it preset? And you and I both agree, yeah, sure, it was preset. But you're not explaining. But just because you can, this is a genetic fallacy. Just because you can explain how the preset can get to where we're at today, it doesn't disregard the question of where the preset came in the first place. Where did it come from? Where did you go? Where did you come from, Cotton?
in the past did not require many functions that modern organisms need, and vice versa. They may have had components that had different but somewhat similar functions that eventually evolved, or it could have had no function at all. Evolution didn't just start off with nothing and continue to add one.
So if it didn't have no function at all, evolution would disselect it and it would be eradicated, thus no longer leaving the opportunity for it to evolve into the mousetrap.
Component after another until it eventually worked. The whole thing evolved together from a preset of items, improving upon their former structures once there's
Still have to explain where the preset came from.
evolutionary pressure to do so. That's the more accurate depiction. The mousetrap example.
Sure. If we accept his picture, still have to explain where the preset came from.
Is just a deception, since it itself is already a very simple type of machinery. A car, for example, would probably be more accurate, even though that's besides the point.
Darwin acknowledged that if someone identified a biological system that could not have been constructed.
So when I mean irreducible complexity with the rotor, motor, and the rod, it's in the fact that the rotor has to have a specific connection to the rotor has to have the specific the motor sorry has to have a specific connection to the rotor has to have a specific connection to the motor, just like keys into a door, very similar to like keys into a door,
In incremental
into which it can be connected just like this has to be keys into a door. The rotor has to have keys into the door of the rod, and if that's not exactly is, it's not going to unlock, it's not going to connect, it's not going to work. That means that the complexity of this, even if it's simple, okay, the fact is that there's not just one cilia, but hundreds of cilias, 200 of them to be precise, on each cell, especially in our throat. And each one, they're all complex. They got 9 components generally, and they all work together, each having a separate function, but working towards the whole, each with a purpose. And they all work together, all with their keys and the locks, kind of like RSA, so to speak, that are complex. But if you reduce it down all the way to the 3, rotor, motor, rod, they cannot be reduced down anymore, but still complex. So the complexity that can no longer be reduced, which is irreducible complexity.
Steps over long periods of time, then his theory would be invalid. And what Michael Behe and others have discovered is the existence of biological machinery that cannot be explained away by Darwinian processes. Darwin's failed predictions have in fact falsified his own theory.
Let's not view Michael Behe here as a revolutionizer. He has been criticized multiple times by other scientists.
You're right, and he has responded to them. And in one time, generally speaking, when he makes a response, they don't respond back. But there was this one time where he did respond. He made a publication concerning a specific bacterium about irreducible complexity. I think it was the flagellum. In which, no, it couldn't have been the flagellum. I think it was a cilium, maybe? No, it had to be something else. Where he was criticized 3 times, and he made a response for each one of them in one paper. And only the 2 of them didn't even make a refutation. They just left it be. One of them made a refutation, and he came back and showed the flaws of his argument and his reasoning and strengthened his conclusion. And the guy never responded. And so, yeah, usually, even though he's critiqued, he has refutations for them, and generally speaking, they aren't answered.
And his irreducible complexity claim has been entirely rejected by the scientific community. Anyway,
rejected by the scientific community because of certain biases, because of the implications.
That's the end of this video. This is actually the first video I have premiered on my channel, so let me know what you think of it. Do you enjoy this style or do you hate it? Write your thoughts in the comment section below. If you came to this video after it premiered, well, sucks to suck. Okay, bye.
Bye! I really like this ending song, I'm not gonna lie. I really do like it. But yeah, there you go, you guys. Briskly Gaming with another response video to this. So sorry that it's long. Looks like a lot of these videos are probably going to be an hour long. I tend to go a little deep into it rather than summarizing it. And so, yeah, I'm so sorry, you guys, that I do not summarize. But either way, I hope that you guys watch this. You don't have to comment, you don't have to like, you don't have to subscribe. All that I care about is that you're watching this. If you do comment, please at least let it be a productive conversation rather than a negative conversation where nothing gets done, no progress is made in either parties or any parties, or rather conversation where it doesn't devolve into a Twitter war, so to speak, but rather where people can make civil conversation or civil discussion, civil debate. So love you all. Hope you all have a good week. Peace be with you all.